Captain Elias Hart stepped off the transport shuttle onto the polished deck of Orion Nexus, the largest interstellar diplomatic station in known space. The station towered like a monument to galactic cooperation. A network of gleaming corridors and massive observation domes where dozens of alien species mingled and negotiated. Humans had only recently been invited to participate in the Interstellar Council, and Elias felt the weight of representing his species. Every step he took echoed slightly in the high-ceilinged terminal, a reminder that he was a newcomer in a world built by civilizations far older and more advanced than his own. The air was filled with an unfamiliar mix of scents, alien flora engineered for the station, the faint metallic tang of ships docking nearby, and the occasional whiff of an aromatic drink from a vendor stall. Elias adjusted the collar of his uniform, the insignia of Earth's diplomatic corps gleaming on his chest. He had been briefed repeatedly on the importance of this reception. The Thalorian Empire, known for its powerful fleets and sharp intellect, had a young princess attending, and she was notorious for her quick tongue and unpredictability. Elias had to tread carefully. "Captain Hart, right this way," a station aide said, guiding him through the bustling crowd. Aliens of every shape and size moved gracefully or lumbered heavily across the floor. Some had translucent skin, others multiple limbs, some even hovered slightly above the ground. Elias found it fascinating. Though he kept his expression calm, curiosity was one thing. Appearing naive in front of seasoned galactic players could be dangerous. When they arrived at the Grand Hall, Elias caught his first glimpse of her. Princess Lyra of the Thalorian Empire stood at the center, surrounded by her advisors. She was striking in a way that commanded attention. Her skin shimmered faintly under the hall lights, and her eyes, golden with sharp pupils, seemed to pierce through everyone present. At 19, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew they were admired, feared, or both. Her gestures were precise, her posture perfect, and her smile had an edge that suggested amusement, or perhaps condescension. As Elias approached, Lyra's eyes flicked toward him. Her gaze lingered, appraising, almost predatory in its precision. "Ah," she said, her voice clear and melodic but with a sharp undertone. "The human diplomat. I've heard interesting things about your species. Curious how you managed to survive this long with such slow technology." Her words, though spoken lightly, carried the weight of judgment. Several nearby Thalorian aides stifled chuckles, and a few alien diplomats glanced at Elias with varying expressions. Some intrigued, some amused. Elias inclined his head politely. "Princess Lyra, it's an honor to meet you," he said evenly. He could feel the heat rise in his cheeks, though he kept his voice steady. He knew that reacting to insults in this room could either escalate tensions or reveal his strength. He chose the latter, calm, deliberate, measured. That was the human way. Lyra leaned slightly forward, her expression a mixture of curiosity and mischief. "I do wonder," she said, "how your ships function at all, given their age. I imagine your strategies must be quaint." She gestured lightly with a slender hand, as if conducting an invisible orchestra of derision. The other diplomats laughed politely, but the sound was hollow. The amusement at a human's expense hung heavy in the air. Elias felt a flicker of irritation, but he swallowed it. He had faced condescension before, though never on this scale. His species was still proving itself in the galactic arena, and he understood that a measured response now would resonate further than a heated retort. "Every species has strengths, Princess," he said calmly. "Our methods may appear slow, but they have kept humanity alive through countless challenges." His voice carried firmness, but there was no anger, just quiet confidence. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, her lips curling into a small, sharp smile. "Is that so? I would like to see these methods in action someday." She tilted her head, observing him as if he were a specimen under study. "Though I suspect humans rely too much on luck, not skill." Her tone was light, teasing, but the sting was unmistakable. The hall seemed to grow quieter as diplomats sensed the tension. Elias noticed subtle shifts in body language around him, curiosity, surprise, cautious admiration. Some species had learned early in galactic history that underestimating humans could be dangerous. Elias understood that, though many here had not. He maintained his composure. Silence could be louder than words. Lyra continued, her voice softer now but no less sharp. Perhaps you would care to explain how your primitive vessels survive in deep space? Or would you rather leave me to speculate? Her question was a challenge, thinly veiled as polite inquiry. A few aides murmured among themselves, noting that the human had not faltered. Most would have attempted a defensive retort. Elias simply nodded once, acknowledging her comment without confrontation. He could feel the curious eyes of the assembly on him, the unspoken question lingering. Would he respond to this insult? Elias felt no need. His species had survived by patience, resilience, and decisiveness, not by proving themselves to critics. Sometimes, walking away could say more than arguing. He excused himself quietly, nodding to the nearest aide. "If you'll excuse me," he said softly, and turned. Heads turned as Elias walked away. Lyra's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by surprise. She was used to arguments, debates, challenges that ended in some form of acknowledgement. But Elias's calm departure left a vacuum, no insult, no rebuttal, no visible emotion. Just human dignity and control. For a moment, the hall seemed to hold its breath. As Elias passed through the corridors of Orion Nexus, he took deep, steadying breaths. The ambient noise of the station filled his ears. The hum of distant engines, the chatter of alien languages, the faint vibrations of moving lifts. He didn't rush. He moved with intention, each step measured. He allowed himself a private moment to reflect. Lyra's insult had not wounded him. Her words were an observation, misguided as they were, and nothing more. Humans did not need the validation of alien nobles to recognize their worth. They proved it every day, through action, through survival, and through ingenuity. Meanwhile, back in her quarters, Princess Lyra's emotions churned in ways she was unaccustomed to. She had expected indignation, an angry retort, or at least some sign of offense. Instead, the human had left silently, without a word. A spark of curiosity ignited within her. Who were these humans? Who could remain unshaken in the face of ridicule? She could not dismiss them as simply naive or primitive. There was a depth she had not considered. Her advisors noted her distraction, but she waved them off. For the first time in many weeks, Lyra found herself genuinely intrigued, unsettled in a way she did not yet understand. Elias continued his solitary walk, moving past observation windows where ships from multiple civilizations floated against the blackness of space. He allowed himself a brief smile. Humans were young in galactic terms, but they had a quiet strength. They had survived countless trials and adapted in ways many older civilizations could not comprehend. A soft, almost imperceptible pride filled him. It was not arrogance. It was certainty that his species had a place in the galaxy, one earned through resilience, strategy, and courage. As he reached a quiet observation deck, Elias leaned against the railing, gazing at a nearby star cluster. The light reflected in his eyes, giving him a moment of solitude amid the bustling station. He considered what had just transpired, not with anger, but with reflection. The insult from the young princess was fleeting, a minor ripple in the vast ocean of diplomacy and interstellar relations. What mattered was action, not words. His departure had spoken volumes, even if no one present had fully realized it yet. He had chosen dignity over confrontation, patience over reaction. This was the strength of humanity, calm, strategic, and unyielding when needed. For Lyra, curiosity turned into a quiet determination. She would learn more about this human, Elias Hart, and perhaps the species he represented. There was more to humans than met the eye. She could feel it, though she did not yet understand why it mattered so much. Perhaps it was a challenge she could not resist, or perhaps it was something deeper. A realization that humans were not to be underestimated, and that their worth could not be measured by age, technology, or status alone. And so, as the station continued its endless rhythm of activity, two figures were set on paths that would soon intersect in ways neither expected. One walked with quiet purpose, the other watched with curiosity, sharpened by pride and the sting of surprise. Both would soon discover that first impressions could be deceiving, and that strength often came in forms that were not immediately obvious. Elias Hart walked through the corridors of Orion Nexus at a measured pace. The reception hall was now far behind him, and yet its echoes lingered in his mind. He did not feel anger, nor embarrassment. Instead, he felt a calm resolve, the quiet knowledge that humans often thrived when underestimated. The station bustled around him, diplomats and merchants hurrying along in their multi-limbed forms, floating beings gliding past, and guards in uniforms of strange metals keeping watch. To many, it was chaos. To Elias, it was merely the backdrop of opportunity. He reached a small observation lounge, a quiet corner where the stars stretched infinitely beyond the glass walls. The view was breathtaking, dozens of star systems glittered like scattered gems, and the station itself seemed tiny compared to the vastness of space. Elias leaned lightly against the railing, thinking. He had grown up on stories of human exploration, tales of ships crossing dangerous space, and humans thriving against odds. No one expected them to survive. That history had taught patience, ingenuity, and resilience, qualities that could not be measured in speed or firepower alone. Meanwhile, far above in the Thalorian princess's quarters, Lyra sat on a cushioned platform, staring at her reflection in a polished surface. She replayed the encounter again and again, each time feeling the strange mix of irritation and fascination grow. It was unusual, she realized, for a species to simply walk away when insulted. Most would have retorted, tried to prove themselves, or even acted out of fear or anger. Yet the human had none of these reactions. He had left without a single word. Yet the silence had carried far more weight than any argument could have. Her advisors were puzzled. "Princess, he seems weak," one said cautiously, attempting to interpret Elias's behavior through the lens of Thalorian logic. Lyra's eyes, golden and sharp, fixed on him. "Weak?" she repeated, her voice echoing slightly in the spacious chamber. "No, that is not weakness. It is control. It is confidence in something I do not yet understand." She tapped a finger against her chin, thinking, "I will learn more. I must see what humans are truly capable of." Back in the observation lounge, Elias allowed himself a small smile. Humans were often judged by outsiders for their youth in galactic history, their relative lack of technology, and their apparent vulnerability. Yet, time and again, humans had survived crises that other species would have collapsed under. They adapted, innovated, and persevered. That adaptability, he knew, was humanity's greatest strength. It was quiet, it was patient, and it often went unnoticed until it could no longer be ignored. He thought again of Lyra, 19 and already commanding respect within her empire. Yet she had underestimated him. Or perhaps she had underestimated humanity as a whole. That was a mistake he was confident she would correct, eventually. Elias had no need to dwell on pride or revenge. Actions mattered more than words. And the galaxy often judged species not by what they said, but by what they accomplished. The day continued, and Elias moved through the station with purpose. He visited the council chambers briefly, making notes on interstellar trade regulations, human representation, and ongoing disputes between species. He observed the dynamics quietly, noting alliances and rivalries. While he was not a warrior, Elias understood strategy, both in diplomacy and in action. He understood that patience, observation, and timing could accomplish what brute force could not. As evening approached, a subtle alarm sounded through Orion Nexus. Not urgent, but enough to catch attention. An approaching fleet of rogue drones, automated warships from a previously neutral system, had been detected at the edge of monitored space. They were heading toward the station at high speed, their purpose unclear but their potential for destruction undeniable. Panic rippled among the assembled diplomats. Messages flashed across terminals, and Thalorian security protocols activated. Elias stepped aside and observed. Others scrambled, shouting orders, contacting fleets, and preparing defenses. Lyra appeared moments later, on the communications console, her expression sharpened by concern and the sudden realization of danger. "They are moving faster than we predicted," she said to her aides, her tone unusually serious. "Prepare shields, deploy interceptors, and alert the council immediately." She looked up at the observation window and noticed Elias calmly observing the developing situation. He did not panic. That calm, measured approach was something she could not ignore. While other species reacted in instinctive fear or frustration, Elias processed information, considered probabilities, and anticipated outcomes. He was a human, yes, and one might have thought his youth or species would make him ill-equipped for such a crisis. But he was not reacting emotionally, he was analyzing, preparing, and planning. Lyra found herself watching him closely. Every small movement, every subtle decision he made, seemed to radiate a quiet competence. Her curiosity grew stronger, mixed with a sense of respect she had not expected to feel for a human. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly, almost to herself. Elias turned slightly, acknowledging her presence without surprise. "They will test every weakness we have," he said. "We need to think beyond our standard protocols. Predict their behavior, and we can protect the station without losing valuable resources." He moved toward a console, scanning tactical readouts and sensor logs. His mind worked quickly, connecting variables that others overlooked in the chaos. Lyra, intrigued and somewhat unsettled, stepped closer. She watched as Elias outlined strategies quietly, suggesting optimal shield configurations, predicting potential drone maneuvers, and identifying weak points in their approach. She began, then stopped. Words failed her for the first time in years. She was not used to seeing humans act with such decisiveness under pressure. Hours passed as the station mobilized under the looming threat. Human crews, initially underestimated, were now coordinating operations alongside Thalorian pilots and technicians. Under Elias's guidance, defensive measures were implemented efficiently. Shields were adjusted in real time, interceptors launched with precision, and evacuation protocols rehearsed calmly. The rogue fleet arrived, and chaos erupted, but the station was ready. Humans executed maneuvers that seemed simple but proved devastatingly effective against the automated drones. Lyra found herself silently impressed. She had expected panic, hesitation, or error from humans. But instead, she saw skill, courage, and adaptability. It was an unfamiliar feeling, one that clashed with the pride she had long held as a Thalorian. Her initial insult to Elias now seemed almost petty. Yet she did not admit it aloud. Observing him in action was far more enlightening than any argument or insult could have been. The threat was neutralized faster than most had anticipated. The rogue drones were disabled, the station sustained minimal damage, and the council breathed a collective sigh of relief. Diplomatic observers and leaders looked toward the human contingent with newfound respect. Elias remained calm, efficient, and unassuming, as if this had been routine. He did not seek praise or acknowledgement. His satisfaction came from the successful outcome and the preservation of life. Later, as the station settled into a cautious calm, Lyra found herself alone in a quieter observation chamber. She stared at the stars, replaying the day's events in her mind. Elias' heart had walked away from her insult earlier in the day, and now she understood why. He did not need to respond with anger or words because actions had already spoken volumes. Humans, she realized, possessed a resilience and intelligence that could not be judged by age, size, or technology alone. For Elias, the day ended much as it had begun, quiet, reflective, and purposeful. He moved through the corridors of Orion Nexus, documenting the events, analyzing outcomes, and preparing reports for Earth's council. The incident with Princess Lyra lingered at the edge of his mind, not as an insult to be addressed, but as a subtle lesson. The galaxy underestimated humans at its own risk. And in the quiet of her chambers, Lyra contemplated a human she had insulted, a species she had underestimated, and the calm strength that had turned a near disaster into triumph. Her curiosity had shifted to respect, though she did not yet fully acknowledge it. She knew, however, that she wanted to learn more, not for pride, not for challenge, but because humans had proven themselves in a way that could not be ignored. Paths that had seemed separate now edged closer together. One walked with quiet confidence, guided by experience and principle. The other observed, sharp, intelligent, and humbled by realization. Both were unaware of the trials the galaxy would soon demand, but each had gained insight into the other, and humanity's true strength had begun to shine in the eyes of those who had once doubted it. The stars outside the observation windows continued their silent march across the void, indifferent to politics, insults, or pride. Yet within the station, a new understanding began to take root. Humans were not to be underestimated. And Princess Lyra, despite her youth and her pride, was beginning to see that. The days after the rogue drone attack were tense, but quiet. Orion Nexus hummed with the usual activity of a busy interstellar station. Yet beneath the surface, tension lingered. Aliens of countless species continued to trade, negotiate, and navigate the politics of galactic diplomacy. Still, the memory of the drone's sudden approach remained fresh in everyone's minds, and whispers about human capability spread like wildfire. Among them, Princess Lyra moved with unusual caution, her thoughts constantly returning to Captain Elias Hart and the calm, precise manner in which he had managed the crisis. Lyra had spent hours reviewing the station's records, analyzing his actions, and comparing them with Thalorian strategies. The more she studied, the more she realized how clever, adaptable, and calm the human had been. Her pride battled with her curiosity. She was a princess of a powerful empire, accustomed to commanding respect. Yet here was someone who had earned admiration through quiet action, not rank. She decided that understanding humans, especially Elias, required more than observation. She would involve herself directly. Meanwhile, Elias continued his work. He moved efficiently between consoles, observation decks, and council chambers, documenting every detail of the threat and refining defensive strategies for the future. Humanity had been underestimated repeatedly, and he felt an increasing responsibility to demonstrate that humans were not just survivors, they were innovators. The rogue drone attack had been a small test, but he knew greater challenges would come. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and often dangerous. Humans could not rely solely on their past achievements. They needed to prove themselves consistently. The opportunity arrived sooner than expected. Reports began to trickle in from nearby sectors. An unknown fleet was moving rapidly toward the station. It was not automated this time. Sensors revealed living pilots aboard sleek, advanced warships. The fleet's origin was unknown, but their approach was hostile and deliberate. Panic rippled through Orion Nexus as the station's council convened emergency meetings. Lyra's usual confidence faltered slightly, but she composed herself quickly. Her advisors awaited her command. Yet her attention repeatedly drifted to Elias. He stood apart from the chaos, analyzing sensor data, predicting enemy movements, and quietly formulating a plan. "Princess," Elias said when she approached, his voice calm but firm, "we need to focus on strategy, not panic. Their movements suggest predictable behavior patterns. If we position our forces wisely, we can neutralize their advantage without significant loss." Lyra frowned slightly. "You're assuming humans are always the smartest in the room," she said, though the edge in her voice was softer than usual. "What makes you so certain this time?" Elias did not flinch. "It is not certainty," he replied. "It is observation, analysis, and experience. Humans have survived against odds that others deemed impossible. We are adaptable. That is our strength." She studied him silently for a long moment, realizing that the arrogance she had expected was absent. There was no boastfulness, only quiet confidence. It unsettled her. But it also sparked a grudging respect. The council agreed to implement Elias's recommendations. Human crews worked alongside Thalorian pilots, sharing their knowledge and adjusting tactics as Elias directed. It was remarkable how quickly his strategies were understood and applied. Shields were calibrated with precision, interceptor routes optimized, and station defenses reinforced without wasting resources. Aliens who had doubted humans now watched with wary admiration. Even seasoned diplomats began whispering to each other, acknowledging that perhaps humanity deserved more recognition than they had previously granted. The fleet arrived, cutting through the void of space with deadly precision. Their ships were faster, more heavily armed, and better shielded than many on the station had expected. Yet the humans' preparation neutralized these advantages. Elias had anticipated their attack patterns, predicted where shields would be weakest, and guided the station's defenders to exploit those vulnerabilities. Each move was deliberate, executed with skill, and timed perfectly. Princess Lyra watched from the observation deck, her heart beating faster than she cared to admit. She had underestimated humans, and more specifically, Elias' heart. She could not help but feel a mix of admiration and frustration. It was as though the human had silently proven a point she could not dismiss. Humanity's strength was not in firepower alone, but in intelligence, adaptability, and calm resolve. Hours passed in a tense flurry of activity. Explosions echoed through the outer hull as interceptor ships clashed with enemy fighters. Strategic maneuvers redirected the hostile fleet, forcing them into traps carefully laid by Elias and his human teams. When one ship breached the outer defenses, human pilots responded with coordinated precision, neutralizing the threat with minimal damage to the station. Each victory, though small, built momentum and confidence among the defenders. Lyra found herself gradually approaching Elias's side, asking questions and offering suggestions. She had never worked so closely with a human before, and she discovered something remarkable. He was patient, listening carefully, considering every option, and valuing input from all species. There was no condescension, no dismissal, only focus and respect for competence. "You are different from what I expected," she admitted quietly as they reviewed tactical updates. "I thought humans relied mostly on luck or desperation. But you..." She paused, searching for words. "You think ahead, you anticipate, you adapt." Elias smiled faintly. "We have to. Survival depends on it. Luck is unreliable. Strategy and adaptation are dependable." Their cooperation grew seamless. Lyra noticed subtle patterns in his decisions, how he predicted not only enemy moves but also the reactions of other species. He understood both the psychology and the logistics of battle. While Thalorians were intelligent and disciplined, Elias's methods were innovative. Combining insight with flexibility, she began to see why humans, despite being young in galactic history, could compete with civilizations far older and more advanced. As the battle drew to a climax, Elias implemented a final maneuver. It required precise timing, coordination across multiple species crews, and trust in human judgment. Some Thalorian officers questioned the plan, but Elias's calm authority and the evident preparation silenced doubt. When executed, it was flawless. The hostile fleet was forced into retreat, suffering significant losses without any major damage to Orion Nexus. Cheers erupted across the station, and the council acknowledged the human contribution with respect and relief. Lyra, however, did not cheer. She simply stood quietly, observing Elias as he continued to check systems, ensuring the station's safety. Her respect had grown, tempered by her pride, and she realized that she had misjudged him, and perhaps humanity itself. 19 years old, powerful, and prideful, she had underestimated the quiet strength of a species that had survived against every expectation. Later, when the immediate danger had passed, Elias walked through the station's quieter corridors, documenting every detail, analyzing outcomes, and preparing reports. He did not seek recognition or praise. His satisfaction came from competence, from knowing that human ingenuity and resilience had saved countless lives. Lyra found him again, this time in a small observation chamber. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass, and the station hummed softly around them. "You were remarkable," she said finally, her voice sincere. "Not just in strategy, but in calm, in focus." She hesitated, searching for words to capture her astonishment. "I thought humans were weak, predictable. I see now I was wrong." Elias inclined his head politely. "Humans are adaptable," he said. "We survive because we anticipate, observe, and act deliberately. We do not need to prove ourselves with words. Our actions show our strength." Lyra considered his words carefully, her pride warring with her growing admiration. She realized that she had insulted him earlier, expecting indignation or humiliation, and had instead encountered quiet confidence and unparalleled skill. It was a humbling lesson, and she felt the first seeds of genuine respect and curiosity take root. The aftermath of the attack brought a subtle shift in the station. Diplomats who had mocked or dismissed humans now approached them with caution and interest. Rumors of human efficiency and ingenuity spread across Orion Nexus, and for the first time, humanity began to earn the recognition it deserved. All the while, Elias remained quietly at work, focused on preparation for whatever challenges the galaxy might send next. Lyra followed him at a respectful distance, observing without interfering, learning without asking. She realized that humans did not need to boast or argue. They proved their worth through action, patience, and insight. And she, young and proud as she was, could learn from their example. By the end of the day, both felt a subtle connection, forged not through words, but through observation, respect, and shared experience. One had earned admiration without demanding it. The other had learned humility and curiosity, traits that would guide her in the days to come. The galaxy remained vast and unpredictable. But one truth was clear. Humanity was not to be underestimated. And Princess Lyra, for all her power, had begun to understand why. The stars outside the station remained indifferent, silent witnesses to the events within. Yet within the corridors and observation decks of Orion Nexus, the balance of perception had shifted. Humans had proven themselves through calm, intelligence, and decisive action. And a young princess, who had once dismissed them as weak, now faced a quiet truth. Strength could come in unexpected forms, and respect had to be earned through deeds, not rank or age. Paths that had seemed separate were converging. One, steady and deliberate, marked by resilience and skill. The other, sharp and curious, marked by reflection and newfound understanding. Both were poised for the challenges ahead. The galaxy watching silently, as two unlikely allies, and the species they represented, prepared to face whatever came next. The calm after the crisis was a quiet, deliberate sort of calm. Orion Nexus had resumed its usual rhythm, diplomats hurrying to meetings, merchants haggling over exotic goods, and engineers maintaining the station's delicate systems. Yet beneath the ordinary bustle, a subtle shift had occurred. Humans were no longer viewed as naive newcomers. Their decisive actions, led by Captain Elias Hart, had earned them recognition that went beyond mere tolerance. Respect now followed their every move, even from species long accustomed to dominating galactic politics. Princess Lyra walked through the observation corridors, her mind restless. The events of the past days had changed her perspective. She had underestimated humans, particularly Elias, and she knew it. The realization gnawed at her pride, but it also sparked an unusual curiosity. She wanted to understand him, to understand humanity, not because she sought to challenge them, but because she now saw something valuable that could not be ignored, something she could learn from. She found him in a quiet chamber overlooking the nebulae, their colors shifting in waves of blue, purple, and gold. Elias stood alone, reviewing reports and tactical data, his expression calm and focused. Lyra approached slowly, aware that this was a delicate moment. He had shown her patience, restraint, and skill in the heat of crisis. Now it was time for words. "Captain Hart," she began, her voice measured, yet tinged with humility. "I owe you an apology." Elias looked up, his calm gaze meeting hers. He did not display surprise or pride, just quiet attentiveness. "For what, Princess?" he asked simply. "For my words during the reception," she said, choosing each carefully. "I insulted you. I underestimated humans. I believed in my own judgment and assumed it was correct. I see now that I was wrong. You, and your species, have proven strength in ways I did not expect." Elias inclined his head slightly. "I accept your apology," he said. "Humans do not measure themselves by the opinions of others. We act, observe, and adapt. That is how we survive and thrive. Words are less important than actions." Lyra studied him for a long moment. His words carried weight, not arrogance, but quiet authority. She realized that she had misjudged not only Elias but the entire species he represented. Humans had endured, adapted, and prevailed in circumstances far more challenging than any she could imagine. Their strength was subtle, yet undeniable. She took a deep breath. "I expected anger, or retaliation. I did not anticipate this." She gestured to him, to the calmness in his demeanor, the precision of his actions, the quiet confidence that seemed to radiate without effort. "It is admirable." Elias smiled faintly, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than vanity. "Thank you. Humans have always relied on preparation, patience, and intelligence. We do not need to prove ourselves through insult or confrontation. The galaxy has its own way of testing us, and we meet those challenges as best we can." The princess considered this in silence. She had witnessed the recent attacks firsthand, had seen humans act decisively when others hesitated, had observed their ability to remain calm under pressure while coordinating complex maneuvers with multiple species. It was a revelation. She could no longer dismiss them. They had earned her respect. Not through words, not through rank, but through deeds. "You have changed my perception," she said finally. "Not only of humans but of myself. I see now that pride and judgment can blind even the most capable. I hope to learn from this." Elias nodded. "Learning is what strengthens all species. Understanding others, observing carefully, and adapting. These are lessons every civilization must embrace. Humans are no exception." Their conversation lingered, unhurried, like a river flowing gently through a valley. Around them, the station continued its steady hum, indifferent to personal reflections or cosmic diplomacy. Yet within that quiet chamber, a connection had formed mutual respect, tempered by experience and humility, bridging species and age. The council soon summoned both Elias and Lyra for a formal debriefing. Representatives from multiple species filled the chambers, their expressions a mix of curiosity, respect, and lingering wariness. Elias presented his findings, outlining the events of the rogue fleet, human tactics, and lessons learned for future coordination. He spoke with clarity, precision, and humility, never claiming credit for the outcome, instead highlighting cooperation across species. Lyra stood beside him, her posture straight, her gaze attentive. When she spoke, it was with genuine sincerity. Captain Hart's leadership and the efforts of the human crews were crucial in protecting Orion Nexus. "We have all learned that strength comes not from age, technology, or arrogance, but from intelligence, adaptability, and calm action. Humans have earned our respect and demonstrated that they are valuable partners in the galaxy." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Some diplomats nodded reluctantly, others with overt admiration. The shift was clear. Humanity's reputation had changed. They were no longer seen as fledgling newcomers. They were emerging as capable, resilient, and intelligent participants in interstellar affairs. After the meeting, Lyra approached Elias privately once more. "You have taught me a valuable lesson," she said, "not only about humans, but about leadership and patience. I underestimated you, and I underestimated your species. I will not make that mistake again." Elias smiled softly. "Respect must be earned through action, not assumed through status. You have learned this, and that is valuable in itself. The galaxy rewards understanding, not pride alone." Lyra considered this carefully. She realized that she had grown not just in perception of humans, but in her own maturity. She had acted with pride, assumed superiority, and allowed her youth to cloud judgment. Elias, through quiet competence and deliberate action, had shown her a different path. Strength could be measured not by status or insults, but by skill, intelligence, and calm resolve. They walked together toward the observation deck, overlooking the nebulae where stars shimmered like distant fires. Silence stretched comfortably between them, a shared acknowledgement of lessons learned, respect earned, and futures reconsidered. Lyra realized that the galaxy was vast, filled with unexpected challenges and unknown civilizations. But she now carried a new perspective. Humans were not to be underestimated. Elias gazed at the stars, his mind ever observant. He thought of the missions ahead, the unknown fleets, and the unpredictable politics of the galaxy. Humanity had proven itself capable today, but tomorrow would bring new challenges. Preparation, adaptability, and calm would remain essential. Yet he felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the respect of allies, and even former skeptics, had been earned through merit, not debate. Lyra, standing beside him, took a deep breath. She understood now that respect and recognition were earned, not demanded. She had learned humility, the value of observation, and the importance of collaboration. Most of all, she had learned that humans, though young in galactic terms, carried a quiet strength that could not be ignored. Days later, the station resumed normal operations. But the changes persisted. Humans were no longer treated as mere guests or observers. Other species consulted them, sought their insights, and acknowledged their competence. Elias continued his work, methodical and deliberate, reinforcing humanity's emerging reputation. Lyra, now more thoughtful and measured, observed him not as a subject of curiosity, but as a partner and equal. The quiet chamber overlooking the nebulae became a place of reflection. Both stood there often, sometimes speaking, sometimes silent, each learning from the other. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, full of danger and opportunity. Together, human ingenuity and Thalorian curiosity created a subtle alliance, a shared understanding that strength could take many forms, and that respect was most meaningful when earned through deeds. As the stars shifted in their eternal patterns, Elias felt the familiar satisfaction of calm competence. Humanity had proven itself once again, not through boastful words or displays of power, but through intelligence, patience, and unwavering resolve. Across the station, whispers of admiration had grown into acknowledgement. And slowly, humans' place in the galactic community solidified. Princess Lyra, once haughty and quick to judge, now carried a deeper awareness. She had witnessed a species that thrived against odds, survived with ingenuity, and acted with measured confidence. She had learned from Elias' heart, and in doing so, had grown herself. Her pride remained, but it was tempered with wisdom, curiosity, and respect, a balance that would serve her in leadership and life. The two figures stood together on the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. In silence, they acknowledged what had been learned, what had been proven, and what lay ahead. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and full of challenges, but humanity, through quiet strength and ingenuity, had earned its place. And for the first time, Princess Lyra understood that sometimes the most powerful force was not technology, age, or status, but the resilience, intelligence, and courage of a species willing to act decisively without needing recognition. The stars continued their endless march, indifferent to politics, pride, or history. Yet within the walls of Orion Nexus, One truth had emerged clearly. Humans had proven their worth, and respect had been earned. And in that truth, a young princess learned that strength could take many forms, and that wisdom often arrived in unexpected ways.